We need to leave. Now." My husband Trevor's voice cut through the morning silence as he frantically threw clothes into a suitcase. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom in Portland, Oregon, watching him with growing confusion and anger. "What are you talking about? Your mother's funeral is in 3 hours," I said, my voice rising with disbelief. "We can't just leave town during Patricia's burial." Trevor stopped packing and looked at me with eyes that seemed haunted. His hands were shaking as he gripped a shirt. "Joanna, please. I'll explain everything later, but we have to go right now." "Explain what? That you're abandoning your own mother's funeral?" I crossed my arms, feeling a familiar surge of frustration with my husband's erratic behavior. "Your family is expecting us. People have traveled from across the country to pay their respects." "My family will understand," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Trevor had always been close to his mother, Patricia. Or so I thought. When she passed away from a sudden heart attack last week, he seemed devastated. But now, on the morning of her funeral, he was acting like a man running from something terrible. "My name is Joanna. I'm 27 years old, and I work as a marketing coordinator for Sundale Financial here in Portland. I met Trevor 3 years ago at a coffee shop downtown, and we married 18 months later in what I thought was the beginning of a beautiful partnership." Trevor worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm, and together we had built what seemed like a solid, middle-class life. But lately, something had been off about my husband, and this morning's behavior was the breaking point. "Trevor, sit down and tell me what's going on," I demanded, blocking his path to the closet. "I'm not leaving this house until you explain why we're running away from your mother's funeral." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd learned meant he was deeply stressed. "There are things about my family you don't know, Joanna. Dark things. And if we stay for the funeral, those things are going to come to light." "What kind of dark things?" I pressed, though a chill was starting to creep up my spine. In the 3 years I'd known Trevor, I'd always felt like there were gaps in his stories about his childhood and family. His mother, Patricia, had been kind to me, but there was something guarded about her, something that made me feel like I was only seeing the surface. "I can't tell you here," Trevor said, zipping up the suitcase. "But if we don't leave now, we might not get another chance." The ominous tone in his voice made my heart race, but not with fear, with anger. I wasn't about to be dragged into whatever mess my husband had created. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs earlier. Trevor's relationship with his family had always puzzled me. Despite claiming to be close to his mother, he rarely visited her. And when we did spend time together, their conversations felt stilted and careful. Patricia lived alone in a modest house on the outskirts of Portland, claiming Trevor's father had died when he was young. But I'd noticed how she never talked about Trevor's childhood in detail, and how she'd change the subject whenever I asked about family photos or old memories. Then, there were Trevor's nightmares. At least twice a week, I'd wake up to find him thrashing in bed, mumbling incoherent words. When I'd ask him about it in the morning, he'd claim he couldn't remember what he dreamed about. But I'd caught fragments. Words like basement, sorry, and most disturbingly, she deserved it. 3 months ago, things had gotten worse. Trevor had become increasingly paranoid, checking our mail obsessively and jumping whenever the phone rang. He'd installed new locks on our doors and started insisting we keep the curtains drawn. When I questioned him about it, he'd brush off my concerns, claiming he was just worried about break-ins in the neighborhood. But the most unsettling change was how he'd started talking about his mother. The warm affection in his voice had been replaced by something colder, more calculating. "Mother's getting old," he'd say with a strange smile. "Her memory isn't what it used to be." When I suggested we visit her more often to help with household tasks, Trevor would become agitated and insist she preferred her independence. The night Patricia died, Trevor's reaction had been all wrong. Instead of the devastation I expected, he seemed almost relieved. He made the funeral arrangements with clinical efficiency, showing little emotion as he selected the cheapest casket and minimal flowers. When I questioned his choices, he'd snapped that Mother wouldn't have wanted anything fancy. Now, standing in our bedroom as Trevor packed frantically, I realized I'd been living with a stranger. The man I'd married was supposed to be gentle and thoughtful, not whatever this paranoid, secretive person had become. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me the truth," I said firmly, sitting down on the bed and crossing my arms. "What happened to your mother, Trevor? And don't you dare say it was just a heart attack." Trevor's face went pale, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear. "Joanna, you don't understand what you're asking. Some things are better left buried." "Buried? Like your mother?" The words came out harsher than I intended, but I was tired of his evasions. "You have no idea what Patricia was capable of," Trevor whispered, his voice barely audible. "What she made me do. What she made all of us do." Before I could respond, we heard car doors slamming outside. Trevor rushed to the window and peered through a gap in the curtains, his face draining of all color. "They're here," he breathed. "Who's here?" I demanded, joining Trevor at the window. 3 black sedans had pulled up in front of our house, and men in dark suits were stepping out. They moved with purpose, their faces grim and professional. One of them was holding what looked like official documents. "Federal agents," Trevor whispered, backing away from the window. "I told you we should have left earlier." My blood ran cold. "Federal agents? Trevor, what did you do?" But instead of answering, Trevor grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the back of the house. "We need to leave through the back door. My car is in the alley." I yanked my arm free, my mind reeling. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's happening. Are you in some kind of trouble? Is this about taxes? About your accounting work?" Trevor laughed bitterly. "Taxes? Joanna, this is so much worse than taxes." He grabbed the suitcase and headed for the back door. My mother wasn't just some sweet old lady. She was involved in things, terrible things. And now that she's dead, everything's coming out. The doorbell rang, followed by heavy knocking. "Federal Bureau of Investigation! Open up!" My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I'd been married to Trevor for over a year, lived with him for nearly 3, and I was just now learning that federal agents were interested in my family. What kind of things was Patricia involved in? "Financial crimes," Trevor said quickly, though something in his tone suggested there was more. "Money laundering, fraud. She ran schemes through various businesses for decades, and His voice trailed off. "You what, Trevor?" "I helped her. Not by choice, but I helped her." He looked at me with desperate eyes. "She had leverage over me, Joanna. Things from when I was younger. Things I can't take back." The knocking intensified, and I heard voices discussing going around back. Time was running out, and I had to make a decision. Every instinct told me to stay and face whatever was happening, to demand answers from the authorities. But looking at Trevor's terrified face, I realized that my husband's secrets ran deeper than I'd ever imagined. "If I come with you," I said slowly, "you have to tell me everything. No more lies, no more half-truths." Trevor nodded frantically. "Yes, I promise. Just please, we have to go now." Against my better judgment, I grabbed my purse and followed Trevor out the back door. We slipped through our neighbor's yard and made it to his car in the alley, just as I heard the front door of our house being forced open. Trevor's hands shook as he started the engine, and as we drove away, I could see federal agents entering our home in the rearview mirror. I had no idea that I was about to uncover a web of crimes that went far beyond anything I could have imagined, or that my decision to flee would set in motion events that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. We drove in tense silence for 20 minutes before Trevor finally spoke. "They were waiting for the funeral," he said, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. They knew everyone would be there. Everyone? What do you mean, everyone? I stared at his profile, trying to read the emotions flickering across his face. Trevor, you promised you'd tell me everything. He took a shaky breath and pulled into an empty parking lot behind an abandoned warehouse. When he turned to face me, I saw tears in his eyes. My mother wasn't just involved in financial crimes, Joanna. She was part of something much bigger. Much worse. What do you mean worse? Human trafficking. The words hit me like a physical blow. Patricia ran a network that moved people, mostly young women, across state lines. She used her legitimate businesses as fronts, and she had connections with organized crime families across the Pacific Northwest. I felt like I was going to vomit. You're lying. Patricia was a retired teacher. She volunteered at the library. That was all a cover, Trevor said miserably. The teaching job was real, but only because it gave her access to troubled teenagers. Girls from broken homes, runaways, kids in foster care. She'd identify the vulnerable ones and... He couldn't finish the sentence. And you helped her with this? My voice came out as a whisper. Trevor's face crumpled. She had photos, Joanna. Photos from when I was 15. She caught me in a compromising position with someone I shouldn't have been with. And she used those photos to control me for the next 12 years. I felt like the world was spinning out of control. The man I'd married, the man I'd shared a bed with, had been involved in human trafficking. How many girls, Trevor? How many lives were destroyed? I don't know, he sobbed. I tried not to think about it. I just did what she told me to do. Handled the money, created false documents, coordinated transportation. I told myself I was just moving paperwork around, but I knew. God help me. I knew what was really happening. I got out of the car and walked a few steps away, needing space to process what I'd just learned. The morning air was crisp, but I felt like I was suffocating. When I turned back to the car, I saw Trevor watching me through the windshield with desperate eyes. Why now? I called out. Why are the feds moving now? Trevor got out and approached me cautiously. One of the girls escaped 3 weeks ago. She went straight to the FBI with names, dates, everything. Patricia knew it was only a matter of time before they built a case against her. So she had a heart attack from the stress? Trevor's silence stretched on too long, and suddenly I understood. She didn't have a heart attack, did she? She took pills, he admitted. A whole bottle. She left a note saying she couldn't face prison. You told me she died naturally. I found her in the note before I called 911. I destroyed the note and made it look like a heart attack. Trevor's voice was barely audible. I thought if they believed she died naturally, maybe the investigation would die with her. I stared at my husband, this stranger who had been sharing my life, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not only had he been complicit in horrific crimes, but he'd also been lying to me about his mother's death. What else aren't you telling me, Trevor? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his face went gray. It's a news alert. The story just broke. Local teacher's human trafficking ring exposed. He looked up at me with haunted eyes. They're calling it one of the largest operations the FBI has uncovered in Oregon. As the full scope of what Trevor had been involved in began to sink in, I realized that my entire marriage had been built on lies. But something else was becoming clear too. Trevor wasn't just a reluctant participant. His detailed knowledge of the operation, his calm efficiency in covering up his mother's suicide, suggested someone far more involved than he wanted me to believe. We need to keep moving, Trevor said, pocketing his phone. They'll have alerts out for my car soon. As I got back into the car, I made a silent decision. I would play along for now, but I was going to find out the full truth about what my husband had done. And when I did, I was going to make sure he paid for every single life he'd helped destroy. We drove north on Highway 26, heading toward the coast, with Trevor constantly checking his mirrors. I sat in silence, my mind racing as I tried to process everything he'd told me. But the more I thought about it, the more questions I had. "The photos," I said suddenly. "The ones Patricia used to blackmail you. You said you were 15 and with someone you shouldn't have been with. Who was it?" Trevor's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "It doesn't matter now." "It does matter. Everything matters now." I studied his profile, noting the way his jaw clenched when he was lying. "Was it one of her victims, Trevor? Was it one of the girls she trafficked?" "No," he said quickly, but then his voice dropped. It was her business partner, a man named Vincent Carbone. He was much older, and he convinced me to do things. Patricia walked in on us and took pictures. I felt sick again, but this time for different reasons. "So you were a victim too?" "At first, maybe. But Joanna, I kept working with them long after I turned 18. Long after I could have walked away." Trevor pulled over at a rest stop and turned to face me. I told myself I had no choice, but the truth is, the money was good. Really good. And I got used to living that lifestyle. "What lifestyle?" "We live in a modest house. You drive a 10-year-old Toyota." Trevor laughed bitterly. "Do you really think my salary from Henderson Accounting could afford our mortgage, the vacations we've taken, your engagement ring?" I looked down at the 2-carat diamond on my finger, a ring I'd always wondered how Trevor could afford on his modest salary. "How much money are we talking about?" "Over the past 5 years, about $2 million. The number hit me like a slap. $2 million. Where is it?" "Offshore accounts. Swiss banks. Places the IRS can't easily track." Trevor looked out at the parking lot, watching a family with young children pile out of a minivan. "Patricia set up the accounts when I turned 21. She said it was my inheritance, payment for services rendered." I thought about our joint checking account, the one where we deposited our legitimate paychecks and paid our regular bills. Trevor had always handled the finances, claiming he was better with numbers. Now I realized there was probably a whole other financial life I knew nothing about. "The FBI will find those accounts," I said. "Eventually, maybe." But Patricia was careful. The money's been laundered through dozens of shell companies and cryptocurrency exchanges. It could take them years to trace it all. A horrible thought occurred to me. "Trevor, how many people know about you? How many other family members were involved?" His face went pale again. "My Uncle Donald knows some of it. And my cousin Marcus definitely knows. There are probably others. But Patricia kept things compartmentalized. Nobody knew everything except her. And now you. And now me." I got out of the car and walked toward the rest stop building, needing time to think. Trevor followed me, maintaining a careful distance. Inside the small convenience store, I bought a bottle of water and stood by the window, watching traffic pass on the highway. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Bethany. "Saw the news about Trevor's family. Are you okay? Call me." So the story was already spreading. Soon, everyone would know that my husband's family was involved in human trafficking. My coworkers, my friends, my own family. They'd all be asking questions I couldn't answer. When I turned around, Trevor was standing behind me, holding 2 energy drinks and a bag of chips. "We should probably eat something," he said quietly. "Where are we going, Trevor? We can't just drive around Oregon forever." "I have a plan," he said. "There's a cabin my family owns up near Mount Hood. It's remote, off the grid. We can lay low there while I figure out our next move." "Our next move? What makes you think I'm staying with you after all this?" Trevor's face crumpled again. "Because you're all I have left, Joanna. Without you, I have nothing." The cabin was exactly as remote as Trevor had promised. A small, weathered structure nestled among tall pines, accessible only by a dirt road that seemed to go on forever. As we pulled up, I noticed there were no other buildings visible, no power lines, no signs of civilization. It was the perfect place to disappear. "How long has your family owned this place?" I asked as Trevor unloaded our hastily packed bags. "Since I was a kid. Patricia bought it as a safe house." He paused, realizing what he'd just said. "For the business." "You mean for hiding trafficking victims?" Trevor nodded miserably. "Sometimes girls would be brought here to wait for transport to other states. I came here a few times when I was younger, before I understood what was really happening." The interior of the cabin was sparse but functional. A main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom with a composting toilet. There was a generator for electricity and a well for water. Trevor moved around the space with familiarity, lighting the pilot light on the propane stove and checking the generator. "We'll be safe here for a while," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I sat down at the small wooden table and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what was happening. In the span of a few hours, I'd learned that my husband was involved in human trafficking, that we'd been living off criminal proceeds, and that I was now officially a fugitive from federal authorities. The life I'd built in Portland was gone forever. "Trevor, I need you to tell me something, honestly," I said. "Are you sorry? Are you genuinely sorry for what you did to those girls?" He sat down across from me, his face etched with exhaustion. "Every day, Joanna. Every single day I think about them. I remember their faces, their ages. The youngest was probably 14. Probably. Patricia didn't always tell us their real ages. She said it was better if we didn't know too much." I felt tears starting to build behind my eyes, but I pushed them back. There would be time to grieve later. Right now, I needed information. How many people were involved in the operation total? In Oregon, maybe 20 people at various levels. Drivers, document forgers, safe house operators, financial people like me. But Patricia had connections across multiple states. The FBI probably has hundreds of people to investigate. My phone, which I'd kept on silent, lit up with another text. This one was from my boss at Sundale Financial. "Joanna, I'm seeing some concerning news reports. Please call me when you can." Trevor noticed me reading. "You should probably turn that off. They can track you through cell towers. I can't just disappear, Trevor. I have a job, responsibilities, people who care about me." "Do you think they'll still care when they find out you're married to me?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I thought about my coworkers, my book club, the neighbors who waved to us every morning. Would they believe I was innocent? Or would they assume I'd known about Trevor's crimes all along? "There's something else," Trevor said quietly. "Something I haven't told you yet." I looked up from my phone, dreading what was coming next. "The FBI isn't the only one looking for us. Vincent Carbone, Patricia's business partner, he's not going to just let this investigation proceed. He has too much to lose." "What does that mean?" "It means we're not just running from the law, Joanna. We're running from people who kill witnesses." As if on cue, I heard the distant sound of a vehicle approaching on the dirt road. Trevor's face went white as he rushed to the window. "Someone's coming," he whispered. The approaching vehicle turned out to be a park ranger making routine rounds, but the incident clarified something crucial for me. As I watched Trevor panic, trembling behind the cabin's dusty curtains, I realized I was done being a passive participant in this nightmare. While Trevor paced anxiously after the ranger left, I quietly slipped into the bedroom and called my sister Bethany from the landline I'd spotted earlier. "Joanna, thank God. Where are you? The FBI came to Mom and Dad's house looking for you." "I'm safe for now," I whispered. "Bethany, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to not ask questions." "What is it?" "Call the FBI tip line. Tell them I want to cooperate. but I need guaranteed immunity. Tell them I have information about offshore accounts and other family members involved. Joanna, what are you doing? What I should have done hours ago. Lonesome. When I returned to the main room, Trevor was staring out the window with haunted eyes. I keep thinking I see cars on the road, he muttered. Trevor, we need to talk about turning ourselves in. He spun around, his face horrified. Are you insane? They'll charge us both as conspirators. You'll go to prison. Not if I cooperate first. I kept my voice steady, watching his expression carefully. I'm innocent, Trevor. I didn't know about any of this. But you're not innocent. And the longer we run, the worse it's going to be for both of us. You don't understand what you're saying. Vincent Carbone has people everywhere. If word gets out that we're cooperating with the FBI, we're dead. Then we make sure the FBI gets to him first. Trevor stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Joanna, these aren't white-collar criminals. These are people who make other people disappear. Good, I said coldly. Then maybe they'll make you disappear too. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I realized I meant them. Looking at Trevor now, knowing what he'd done, I felt nothing but disgust and anger. This man had participated in the destruction of young women's lives, profited from their suffering, and then lied to me for the entire duration of our relationship. You don't mean that, Trevor said softly. I absolutely mean it. You're a monster, Trevor, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of monster you are. The next morning, Trevor woke up to find me gone. He discovered a note on the kitchen table that read simply, I've gone to do the right thing. Don't follow me. What Trevor didn't know was that I hadn't gone far. I'd spent the night in my car, parked just out of sight down the dirt road, waiting for the FBI agents my sister had contacted on my behalf. At dawn, 3 black SUVs made their way up the mountain, guided by the GPS coordinates I'd provided. I met them at the main road and led them back to the cabin. Trevor was still in his pajamas when they surrounded the building, his face a mask of betrayal and terror when he saw me standing beside the lead agent. Joanna, what have you done? I've stopped running, I replied. The arrest was swift and efficient. Trevor offered no resistance, though he kept staring at me with wounded eyes as they read him his rights. When they found his laptop, Agent Martinez smiled grimly. This is going to make our case much easier, she told me. Financial records, communication logs, everything we need. As they loaded Trevor into one of the SUVs, he called out to me one last time. They'll never believe you didn't know anything. You're going down with me. But I wasn't worried. Over the past 18 hours, I'd realized something important. I was excellent at reading people and situations. I'd sensed something was wrong with Trevor for months, and I'd documented my concerns in my journal, in texts to friends, in conversations with family members. I had evidence of my own innocence. More importantly, I had detailed information about the offshore accounts Trevor had told me about, locations of other family properties, and names of people he'd mentioned. Information the FBI desperately needed. The cooperation agreement my lawyer negotiated was generous. Full immunity in exchange for complete cooperation. By the time Trevor's trial began 6 months later, I was the prosecution's star witness, and he was facing life in prison without the possibility of parole. The aftermath of Trevor's arrest sent shockwaves through the criminal network Patricia had built. Vincent Carbone was arrested 3 weeks later when FBI agents raided his compound in Northern California, where they discovered evidence of trafficking operations spanning 5 states. The investigation ultimately led to the arrest of 47 people and the rescue of 19 young women who were being held against their will. Trevor's cousin Marcus was found dead in his apartment, an apparent suicide, though investigators suspected he'd been silenced by Carbone's associates. Uncle Donald was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to money laundering and conspiracy charges. As I stood outside the courthouse after Trevor's sentencing hearing, watching him be led away in shackles, I felt a complex mix of emotions wash over me. I had successfully exposed the truth and brought justice to the victims of Patricia's horrific enterprise. But the journey had fundamentally changed who I was. I was no longer the naive woman who had believed in the fairy tale of her marriage, but I had become someone stronger, someone who would never again allow herself to be deceived by the people closest to her. The revenge I had taken wasn't just against Trevor. It was against my own willingness to ignore warning signs and accept comfortable lies, and in that sense, it was the most important victory of all.